Members all, good morning. The meeting having been called to order by the Secretary, I'm now going to proceed to item 2, which is prayer. Could I ask Member Sibley to lead us in prayer?
Let us pray. Eternal Almighty God, we ask for your presence today on our deliberation. We ask that you continue to bless our civil service. We ask you to bless all the leaders of this country. We ask that you continue to bless Jamaica, land we love. And we ask for all mercies through your blessed Son name, Jesus. Amen.
Thank you, Member Sibley. Welcome, members all. Welcome to the Ministry of Finance, Madam FS and her deputy. Could we invite, members, the 3 ministries that we're going to be dealing with is completion of Ministry of Education, which we think we dealt with substantially the last time. There may be a couple of questions to be raised. I just have a couple of my own too that I will raise. Then we should be through with the Ministry of Education, and then we go on to Ministries of Local Government and Rural Development and the Ministry of Social Security. Both ministries are steeply involved in the COVID related activities for which the supplementary budget is centrally around. So that is the proposed order. We started a bit late. The intention was to complete very early this morning so that our consultant and the secretary could finalize the report, which we intend to table this afternoon. So we want to go through this session in a very expeditious way, not to rush beyond what the members would want to have dealt with, but wanted to be mindful of that. We give a commitment that we'll have the report ready for tabling this afternoon. That said, could you invite the ministries in? Madam PS. Welcome, Madam PS and your team. Welcome to your familiar place that you have great comfort and find joy in being at. Don't look at me like that, PS man, as if I'm not telling the truth. As you recall, we had substantially gone through the Ministry of Education the last time, but time was very pressing on us. We had to exit the chambers to allow for the sitting to proceed. And so the meeting was basically aborted at midstream, so to speak. I recall then, before we close, there were a couple of questions being asked by, I remember clearly, Member Olness, and I had said to just consider those advance notices of the questions to the answers to be given this morning when we meet again. Member Olness is not in the chamber. I don't know. For the records, you can still provide the answers with them having been tabled before. So those are the ones I specifically recall are outstanding. I have a couple of my own, and then I'll open up for any further questions from the members. But we don't expect you to be here too long this morning. Before you answer, Pierce, Member Sibley's, you were intimating or want to come in.
Yes, Chair. I should have earlier tender apologies for Member Oolness, who will not be here today, and well as Member Enriquez and Member Morrison.
Member Sibley's, my fault. It's an item that I never took, which is on the agenda, which would have allowed you to do it. So members are recommitting that item to accommodate the apologies, those proffered by Member Sibley's. Are there any other apology? Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. The team that was here last week is again here this morning. Dr. Kesson Troop, our Chief Education Officer, will respond to the areas that Member Holness asked last week. And then there was a question that was asked by MP Whitto regarding the provision for support for those of our children that we will engage through the yard-to-yard Finding the Child initiative. He wanted to know if and when we find these children, how will we support them? So as we had indicated, we are far advanced in terms of the completion of the framework document to guide this implementation. And a part of the questions that we will ask the parents would be what would be preventing these children from coming to school. And based on the responses they provide and the categories they fall in, whether they are students on path or whatever other category, we will try to analyze the data to see how best the support can be provided. Whether it is, of course, those that are within our control. For example, if we can source additional tablets through the OYOD program or through the One Laptop Per Child initiative, or whether these students are on path and can benefit from support from the Ministry of Labor and Social Security and other entities. And those that do not fall into these categories, then we will make representation internally to see how best we can support these of our those students through the schools. So that's a part of the overall framework for support to be provided if the support that is needed is currently preventing these children from being able to access whether online or the other methodologies that we have for learning at this time. So Dr. Troop will now respond to the interventions that we have in place and will be putting in place to make up the learning loss, which was the question that Member Holness had zeroed in on, sir.
Yeah, before you go on, do that same yard-to-yard.
Finding the child, or Find the Child initiative.
Yeah. You said the profile is being developed. What sort of time frame you're working on for that?
So we are expecting that by mid-November or thereabout, we will be able to actually commence the implementation, which would be going into the communities. There are a number of follow-up activities that we have to do before then. For example, we will, of course, through our minister, be sending the request for you to provide us with the names of some young people to fit the profile that we will be using along with the guidance counselors and social workers to go into the communities. We will be training these young people. There is a customer service module that the Heart Trust NTA has that we will have them trained for a couple of days and ensure that they receive the appropriate guidance and assessment. And then they will work through the schools in terms of the school being the base and going out into the communities in and around. Of course, they will be provided with the necessary support in terms of data collection. We are in the process of creating an app that will allow us to have the information being readily available for analysis purposes. So it's a lot of preparatory work to be done, sir. Plus, Dr. Troop and the team, they have already collected the data in terms of those who are currently not engaged, which he will share with us shortly as well, sir.
Okay, thanks. Member Anna and
Mr. Chairman, I remember asking the permanent secretary last week about what the minister had announced.
Right.
And she did say that program was already in place. The follow-up question that I actually had, which was, I think, was when the doctor was coming back to answer, was along the lines of how will you identify the students, how many will you identify? The concern, and I will hear what the doctor has to say, but the other concern I had, which you mentioned, was that you had budgeted 95 million. I will listen, but I'm concerned from the outset based on your opening remarks about this program. The minister came to say that it was 2,300 students that the ministry was able to interact with in that community intervention program in the initial stages, and that you were able to work with those students 3 days a week in groups of 5, giving them 1.5 per day. Based on what you're saying, though, I'm wondering if the program is going to need more time to develop, because this is an immediate and urgent issue. And so these are some of the concerns that I have, especially in the absence of any kind of assurances as to the resumption of face-to-face classes. So I'm concerned, and the reason why I raise the concerns is so that when the doctor is making her presentation, she is cognizant of some of the burning issues that I believe other colleagues are experiencing, and parents who are out there as well, and ordinary citizens.
To understand, I just want to make sure that I have gotten it right, that the yard-to-yard initiative is a separate initiative from the National Learning Intervention Plan strategy. So Dr. Troop is going to update you, and then after she has spoken, if there are other questions, we will try to address those as well. Dr. Troop.
For Dr. Troop, Member Hamilton.
Much obliged, Chair.
And this is a problem that I have, because there seems to be so many mixed signals coming from the Ministry of Education as to the different programs. The intervention community program that the minister spoke about. So the yard-to-yard is a different program, because what the minister spoke about is this program that was going to be expanded. So this program where you go in, you find the young people, they were in groups of 5, etc. That's a different program now from the yard-to-yard program. So it's 2 programs that you're running on parallel tracks to do the same thing. And that's why I'm saying I'm waiting to hear what the doctor has to say, because you have so many different programs, and I'm wondering if the resources that you're using, and I don't know it's 95 million now for the yard-to-yard program. What is the cost of the intervention program, plus the tablets in school program, plus the Wi-Fi program? We just need to streamline so that we can know what is, at the end of it, what are we expecting, or what are children expected to benefit from, especially those who are not having online access, etc. So, Chairman, I don't know, you had a...
Chair...
Can just respond to Member Hamilton at the same time. Go ahead. Member.
Well, Chair, I think Member Hannah expressed my concern, because I was a bit confused, because I remember the last time we had the ministry before us, there was this program where teachers would have been deployed to communities on a, 2 or 3 times per week basis to do some intervention to mitigate against the learning loss. So I wasn't sure whether or not this was the same program or a separate program, which is why I resorted to asking a question.
So the initial program, which let me use yard-to-yard, leads into the intervention program. So it's actually a continuum, but it's really just how the programs are separated. Remember, Hannah, if you could just allow Dr. Troop to just go through in terms of what is in place, and then if there's further clarity, then we will provide it. Doc.
Okay, good morning, Chairman, good morning, members. So just to give a quick overview of what we have in place, as our minister would have indicated, we have been tracking the engagement data over the last year since the pandemic, and that information we have been using to design intervention to increase the number of students who are fully engaged in the learning experience. So we ended the school year last year with approximately unable to account for approximately 120,000 of our students. We would have seen the attendance data and enrollment data moving up and down in individual schools, but at an average, we were not able to. So the team went back into design mode to see how is it that we can address this gap that we're experiencing, in addition to the fact that we would have had a decline in the achievements level of our students, being that we are experiencing the disruption. So what we came up with was the National School Learning Intervention Plan. And under that plan, there are several initiatives. So we have one that looks at extending learning. And remember, you would have been following the debate where there was a recommendation to extend the school year. But in addressing that and in responding to that recommendation, what we did was to roll out the summer school, which was the first component of the National School Learning Intervention Plan, again to extend the learning opportunities. And that was a fully funded program by the ministry. We were able to engage over 80,000 students in that activity. We had roughly 40,000 in the face-to-face engagement and another 40,000 in the online version using our education service providers. Whilst that was happening, we had a team, which was the regional support team, working with the school-based team that you would have heard our minister spoke about, to identify and locate those missing students. We want to know where they were, what was happening, and out of that leg of the work, we were able to identify 45,000 of those students who we could not locate during the school year. And out of that, we had a...
Not to cut you, Mr. Chairman, I want you to be very specific with the numbers, Doc.
Right.
So you had 120,000 that you could not account for.
Right.
Then you were able to get 80,000 into a remedial summer program, which was 40,000 face-to-face, 40,000 online.
Yes.
And you're saying another 45,000.
No, it is not in addition. The 45,000 speaks to those that were not engaged. There was a specific focus on trying to find them. So we got the information from the school.
And that is the 45 out of the 120 that were not accounted for in the first place.
Yes.
That's what I was trying to clarify.
Right. So we were able to focus on those, and out of that, the team was able to re-engage, communicate, and support in a targeted way 25,000 of those students. So we were able to identify the students, track them, engage with them, finding out what was happening, and we were able to see 25,000 of those students participating in summer school, and the family support was provided. So those were some of the preliminary activities that went into preparing for the school year. For September now, we launched the NSLIP, and in that now, which would have focused on the organization for learning, looking at the modalities that would now become available to us. Initially, we were planning for face-to-face, TV, and learning kits and so, but that was not possible, so we had to rely on the other three modalities, which was the online, the audiovisual, and the provision of the learning kits. We also had the diagnostic data that we were able to develop the instruments sent to the school as a way of supporting the schools, because it was very taxing on our teachers to be able to write the instruments, to mark the instrument, to analyze. So what we did at Central Ministry was to, guided by the curriculum, develop the assessment instrument, standardize that, deliver it to the schools, provide the facility for them to administer that, and then we also analyze the data for them. So out of that data, we would have identified students who were performing at average. They were able to succeed, meeting the targets for the school year, even though we had a disruption. We had students who were referred to as Tier 2. They needed additional support. They were functioning, but they could function using self-paced or self-regulated learning by touching up a few of the weak areas. And then we had some critical students. Now we refer to them as Tier 3. Those were the ones who were not functioning with respect to the accomplishment or attainment of the objectives that we would have set for them for the academic year. Those students are the ones that we would be targeting for an additional opportunity of extended learning. So in addition to the school learning program, which happens every day, which is the online, the audiovisual, and the learning kits, we are now providing an additional opportunity under the NSLIP, which is what we call our extra lesson homework program. And this should have been rolled out because it includes face-to-face, and more so for those Tier 3 children, because they cannot function within the virtual space only. They need hands-on support. And so we have created a framework. As soon as we're able to roll out face-to-face, that aspect will come on board for those students.
Mr. Chairman, how many students are in the Tier 3? What are the ages of these students?
Well, I don't have the data for the ages, but we know that the assessment would include both the primary and the secondary division. And we would have had the students. I would have to provide you with the data on that. I don't want to misquote, but I can get you that data.
And in the 45,000 or the whole 125,000?
Go again?
100 and, no, she said it.
120.
The 120.
Yes.
These Tier 3 are as a part of the 120,000 overall? Or the 80,000 that were in the summer school?
Well, the assessment data came from the entire school population, which would include those in summer schools, because some of them would have been at school.
No, let me ask it again, maybe I didn't ask it correctly. The 120,000 students who were unaccounted for, that you went out and you were able to have data for, were the assessments done on those 120,000, or were the assessments done on all of the school population, that 211,000 plus in secondary
and primary?
There's more in primary, I believe.
Right. Yes, so it was done generally.
It was done generally
across the board.
Okay.
Because that was supposed to inform how we organize for learning in the new school year, because the aim is to be targeted and to support the student at their level. Then we will take them further. So those students who were out, I could safely say perhaps they would not have been assessed because there's no record of them being in school. So we still would not have been able to account for them at that time. The plan would have been, once we re-engage them in the new school year, you would start the school year with the gap test analysis for them.
Okay, so what you're saying is that 120,000 students who are unaccounted for have not been assessed.
They would not have been in the diagnostic because they would not have been at school. Remember, the school leaders would have been reporting that these students...
I'm hearing you. I'm just a little baffled, and it's that's why I said it's really I'm really concerned. So the entire school enrollment population should be what,
414,000 approximately,
and 120,000 of that 413,000 were unaccounted for last school year.
Yes, and we have seen a decline in that since the start of this new year.
A decline in the numbers that were unaccounted for.
Just before I go to Member Sibley's, then Member France, you want to yield to her? Okay. I was curious about the definition of the unaccounted for 120 that you reference. How do you define it?
The students who are reported by their principals as not attending school. They are not on the online, they are not collecting their learning kits, they are not accounting for the audiovisual experience.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so when I first heard about the Tier 3, I thought it would be composed of those in the unaccounted for.
Naturally would be, but we wouldn't be able to to say that definitively at this point because they were not assessed in the cohort because they were not at school. But once we re-engage them, they would be assessed, and chances are they would be in that level because they have been disengaged for a while.
So then, the composition of the Tier 3, if it does not include the students that were unaccounted for, what are some of the factors that would contribute to them being in this tier? Because in my mind, Tier 3 would be for those who have not really been grasping, not engaging, and so on. So if it is that this does not include those, what other factors would contribute to them being in the Tier 3?
Well, as I indicated, the data now that we are speaking to, they would not have been assessed then, so they would not have been included in the tier as we are defining it now. But it is assumed from what we would have picked up from the data that if these students have not been engaged with the curriculum and they're assessed using the curriculum, then they would definitely fall into the Tier 3. Right? Remember, we have 120,000 students approximately that are to be assessed. Let us put it that way. So once they are engaged, they will be assessed using the diagnostic tool. And it is anticipated, being out of school for a year, that you would need the Tier 3 support. Right.
Doc, I know you don't have all the data, but I'm really interested in what you're saying because I think it gets to the crux of the matter. You said that the figures for the unaccounted for declined. Can you therefore tell us, of the 120,000 that were unaccounted for, how many of that 120 are now accounted for?
Okay, so since September 6th, we have been tracking the data for the students who have been reporting to school. The week ending September 10th, we have seen 56% of the students reporting for school, which means that we would have seen a 44% missing at that time. And we would have expected that because they were coming in with rolling admission. There were different things happening in the first week, as per normal. By the second week of school, we saw 66% of our students being accounted for, which would mean 34% would still be missing.
This is the 56
Current.
of the 120,000 or of the 413 plus thousand?
Of the 414.
No, that's not the question I'm asking you. Mm-hmm. What I'm asking you is last year you said that 120,000 students were unaccounted for. Was there any analysis or any kind of methodology used or instrument within the ministry to identify whether that 120,000 unaccounted for are now registering this year?
All right,
those names, those principles, have they been able to come back to you, Doc, and say, look, we never see Mass Joe daughter or Cheryl Lee Brown come last year, but she has registered this year. That's what I'm trying to find out from you.
Right, so that number is being collated. We have not been able to sit and to dissect that precisely. The general feedback is that some of those students are still not back and some are back, but we have not been able to put that entire portfolio together to get a specific look at those 120.
Okay, so 120,000 is about 30% of the overall school's population last year. Based on what you're saying to me, in the second week of September, you're up to 64% in terms of registration. So we're still basically out by 36% of the school's population to date.
Well, the last data coming in would show 26% out. We are seeing 74%.
No, in week 3. So we're up to 74% at this point.
Yes.
What are we going to be doing to make sure that we follow up to get the additional 26% of the students unaccounted for? Is that what the yard-to-yard program is to do now?
Yes.
And when will that yard-to-yard program begin?
Right, that is what our PS alluded to earlier. So coming out of this data analysis, our minister would have directed us that we had to do another level of intervention. So we have to find these students, and that is how we came up with the yard-to-yard. So we'll have family intervention officers going directly into homes. We have gone into the, what I'm giving you now is average attendance or non-attendance. We have now gone into the specific data for the schools, and we have identified over 600 of those schools that we are going to be targeting. 600 schools would have indicated that they would have seen a maximum of 60% of their students unaccounted for in some weeks. So those are the schools that will be firstly targeted.
And which regions are these in? And
These,
when you speak of the regions, maybe it's better to speak about parishes.
Well, these are right across. I can say when we look at the regional accountability data, we are seeing it very close. In some regions, we have up to a maximum of 33% of the students unaccounted for and below. So that's how we would have seen it. But if you were to go into numbers, we would have seen Region 1, which is Kingston and St. Andrew, with most of the students in terms of numbers, because this is a bigger region. We have about 97,000 students in Region 1 alone. So when you look at numbers, Region 1 is of concern. But when you look at percentages, we would have seen a maximum of 33% in any one region being unaccounted for.
So you're hoping that this yard-to-yard program is really going to do the trick in bringing these students either back to school or giving them the remedial, the support at home.
Yes, because this is supposed to identify the students, and then, as PS alluded to, the social workers and the guidance counselors, who are the trained individual, now will do the other leg of the wraparound services to provide the welfare service support that the families need.
I have a corollary question to that one, because I think most of the time persons who are looking at the data believe it is only one child perhaps in a family, when sometimes you have a family of 6,
yes,
with a child that is 4, that is 6, that is 10,
yes,
that is in high school. What will the yard-to-yard program do to make sure that in communities where you have families with this kind of experience, do you have the kind of human resource mechanism to support families, large families, families who have had children from basic school to high school, out of school? Do you have those resources in place?
Remember, we do. We are committed to doing what needs to be done to support our families. We realize at this point in time, it's a crisis for the families. And so it is not that they don't want to do, it's just that the enablement needs to be provided. And this is what the team members will be trained to do. That is why our PS alluded to the interview skills and the customer service skills. And then after that, they will shift those parents to the specialists, which is the social workers, the guidance counselors who are trained. And we will be pulling on the wraparound services, which is really partnering with other social entities. So where a family may need to be referred to PATH, for example, that kind of support will be provided. Where a family may need counseling, where a family may need recommendation for counseling at another level of institution. So that's the kind of data that we will be pulling from the families when we meet them, and then the services now will be provided. Our PS and our minister would have given a directive for 2 levels of interviews, one with the initial family empowerment officers in the field to identify and refer, and then for the support officers now to do the deeper dive, to gather the information, and then for the support to be provided. Bearing in mind, member, that at the school level, we also would have had resources provided for welfare support at the school. So we'll be pulling also on that as we try to get them back into the environment.
Member Davis? Member Sibley's.
Thank you, Chair. Was it last week? We had the Ministry of Health here with regards to vaccination, and there was a number of questions as to whether or not we have done our best to vaccinate our students. But the CMO reminded us that the most vulnerable of the society is where we would like to get at least over 60% vaccinated. And that is the concern with sending out our children to have face-to-face. The question is, with regards to the 45,000 students out of the 120,000 students that weren't attending classes, is the ministry considering, after investigating whether or not their parents have been vaccinated, to have some face-to-face intervention with these students, because it is really the 120,000 overall not attending any class for last year. You can imagine how far back they are, and intervention, and the second, the question to that, the B to that, after you have assessed the reason for them not attending classes, if the reason is that they don't have any equipment, tablets, laptop, will the ministry make an effort to have those students given the tools so that they can now be in the system?
So, member, the matter of vaccination, we work very closely with the Ministry of Health and Wellness. We try as best as possible not to cross in the lane that we have no expertise on. And so we depend on the Ministry of Health to support the vaccination initiative for our students and their families. And you would have noted in, I think it was in September, when, of course, we rolled out the support, and about mid-September, throughout to the end of September, we got the approval to prepare our vaccination blitz within the schools. Should I stop, sir, or should I continue?
Yes. I'm just, for clarification, to just, because the way you started, I am thinking that maybe you misunderstood what I had asked.
Okay.
Which is, you started by saying that you do not try to intervene with cross lanes, but that is fully understand and appreciated. No, what I'm asking is with regards to these 120,000, specifically the 45,000 that you would have already found, right? If you could get full data to find out if their parents have been vaccinated, because the CMO expressed that one of the things that the country is trying to achieve is to protect the most vulnerable of the society as it relates to the COVID-19. So I'm saying my hope is that we could bring those 45,000 back into the system, and it may need face-to-face intervention, but with the fear that they may have vulnerable persons back home that might be challenging. I'm saying, would you capture the data and consider to bring those students, if you would have assessed in consultation with the Ministry of Health that it is safe to bring these students face-to-face, knowing that their parents and their home, the family setting, does not have the vulnerable group. And the B part of the question is, if they have vulnerable person and the reason for not interacting is because they don't have the instruments, will the ministry, outside of the other projects that you have been doing, an initiative with giving tablets and laptops, target those students to ensure that they get the kind of devices that they would need? That's what I was asking.
Right. So, Member Sibley, it would be very difficult for us to pull the vaccination data of those students' parents. And hence, that's the reason I spoke the way I did. We have access from the ministry to the data regarding the number of students who are vaccinated, as well as the number of educators who are vaccinated. So we would not use an approach of determining whether these students should go face-to-face if their parents are vaccinated, but we will continue to observe what the Ministry of Health has said in terms of the number of cases and the positivity rate. And once we get the go-ahead in terms of face-to-face based on the positivity rate and the number of cases, then these students, of course, would be involved in face-to-face. And this 45,000, these students would definitely be a part of the community intervention that Dr. Troop spoke about earlier. As it relates to resources, yes, I had alluded to this earlier from a question that Member Witt had asked last week, that a part of the data gathering will include what support these parents will need for their children to be engaged, whether it is face-to-face when that time comes, virtual learning, learning kits, or using the television, cable, and so on. So whatever those needs are, then we will try to see how best we can seek the support from the different entities to ensure that it is not because of a resource that is needed. And the point that Member Hannah made about the number of children in one household is one that we are carefully considering, because we know sometimes there is one mobile phone for 4 or 5 children to access, and it becomes virtually impossible for the parent to monitor and for the students to get access. So we are taking that into consideration. We have been ramping up the 1 laptop per child initiative, and it is going very, very well at this time in terms of getting devices from different just volunteers. And of course, I would have spoken to the other avenues through which we are trying to get devices as well. So the answer to that one is yes, sir. But the vaccination one, don't know if I interpreted you correctly, but we wouldn't be able to get the actual parents' information, and we wouldn't use that to determine how we would engage those students. What is important is the engagement to make up the learning loss, and we will be guided by the experts in terms of the varying losses and where we would need to start from to support those of our students.
I'm going to take Comrade Hamilton, Comrade Hannah.
Come on. Chair. Mr. Chairman.
What did I say? You know when you're accustomed to certain forums.
No, Chair.
So you know, Member Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. I crave indulgence.
My apology for my inappropriate address.
Most inappropriate, Chair. I crave indulgence of the committee because I wasn't here the last time you were before us. So I'm not sure if this information was already supplied, but I still have quite a few teachers in my constituency that are without devices. I know that the ministry had a laptop initiative, I think it was. What's the status of that? Have all teachers been supplied with instruments to date?
So, Member Hamilton, we provided 26,000 and about 33 tablets to our teachers within the course of last year into earlier this year. Just to say, however, that the initial 25,000 came under an agreement with the Jamaica Teachers Association, which we had negotiated before, and they came right on time to be provided for each teacher, and that was handled through e-learning. So all the members, registered members of the JTA, were supported, and after that we provided for those who were not a part of that agreement. So effectively we can say each teacher has a tablet. I will hasten to say, however, the tablets have not proven to be the most effective tool for the teacher. It's very difficult to manipulate. It's very difficult to be in different screens and to utilize it how you would want to when you're actually doing a lesson on the Google Classroom. And so there has been an appeal for laptops to be provided for our teachers. We have started that process. We are in the process of including that under the Own Your Own Device Initiative Phase 2, which is expected to commence shortly. And we are starting with the provision of 5,000 laptops to be provided for our teachers in the first phase. And then as budgetary allocation allows, then we would be able to gradually build out, because this has become the most important tool for our teachers. In the interim, our CEO continues to encourage the school's principals with her team to utilize the grants that we send to schools to allow for laptops to be procured and used, whether within the class environment or to be on loan to the teachers, especially at the high school level. We know it's still not effective as we would want, or still not adequate, and so that is why we are moving towards getting this 5,000 within this year to see how best we can continue to plug that hole at this time.
What's the complement of teachers that exist in the system now?
Okay, the data that we have currently is 25,074. This is the 2020 data that we currently have.
25,000 teachers in total?
25,074 in our public schools, that is, member.
Member Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Madam PS. Do we have the number of students that are on path?
Yes, Chairman, we do have that number.
Fine. Do we know the number of students that are on path that have our owner device through the owner device initiative?
Not in its entirety as yet, but I would say we have about 80% of that information already. And I could, if you need further explanation, I could say why that is so. Right, so last year, September thereabout, we made allocation for 40,000 tablets for grade 4 to 6. So, of course, that went through e-learning in terms of procurement and distribution, and we depended on the local level for the actual distribution to a parent for a child. We would have done the reconciliation where that is concerned, and I think we distributed about 36,000 to actual PATH students. Of course, you know that the PATH students from time to day, it's not like they are permanently students on PATH. And so the additional from that we would have now been distributing in this school year to those students who would have moved from grade 3 over to grade 4. So we have that data. We also provided 15,000 laptops for the students on path at grade 10 to 13. We were able to have an electronic system where once the student, a laptop is pinned to the student's information, and so once they open, then our system, e-learning, would record that information, so we know those who would have. This would have resulted in some of these students being a part of the unengaged, if I should say that, and hence, once the schools have picked up these students, for example, now the engagement rate has gone up, we would have had to get those computers that were initially for other students reprogrammed if it is not for those students. And so that is why I'm saying we do not have the 100% data, because over on the other side, there is the 1 laptop per child initiative where we tag the students with the student registration number, which is the registration system in the ministry, and we keep a database of the past students who would have been provided with tablets. So eGov actually handles that information, and so as it increases, we are able to say those students on path who have, those who do not, and if you as an MP is going to be providing a tablet, we can tell you that the student has already received, or the student is on path and will receive, so we do not duplicate the distribution of the resources.
Members, permit me, just to remind you that I have, in addition, Member Sibley's, Member Hannah, and I would like to close the discussions after that with Ministry of Education because of the time restraint that we're working with to complete for the report. So Member Clark, then Member Hannah, and Member Sibley's. And
the fact, Mr. Chairman, that these children are on path speaks to finance from the home, meaning that they are without. How do you, what is the check and balance in place to make sure that internet service is provided for them? Is there any check and balance in that aspect?
Member, that is really a very difficult question because of the fact that the internet spread across the country is not equal. And so while we could readily provide support in areas where there is the flow of bandwidth, there are some parts in the country where it doesn't matter whether you have data or not, you are not able to access the internet at all. And so for those areas which we have found to be our deep rural and inner city areas, it's really difficult. And that is why last year we would have engaged ReadyNet to power 100 schools. I think they did about 102 in those deep rural and inner city areas, because from the audit that was done, these were areas that they needed to have that satellite support for them to be able to access the internet. So it is not even across the board, but as I had indicated last week, we have 3 initiatives that are out now. One has to do with improving the fiber backbone across the country, and about 346 schools or so will benefit. And we have a procurement out for 621 schools. I think the bids are now in and are being evaluated, and this we expect to be completed by the end of the year. And there is another one for a little over 400 schools, which is to the provision of satellite service, which we are expecting the bids to be closed in another week or so, and then we will have this completed by the end of the year or early January for those contracts to be awarded for support. And based on the level of interrogation and research done by the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology in terms of this project, we believe that the schools will be covered across the island when this is completed. And because we have our primary schools mainly in communities, we expect that many of the deep rural communities will be served accordingly. And of course, being in the communities being served as well, our libraries and other public buildings with, of course, the community access points by MSET as well, will also improve the access across the country.
Member Hannah, Member Sibley's. Go ahead.
P.S. We've met on several occasions, and I think you know my burning desire to make sure that we get education right in this country, and for so many reasons. When do you anticipate us getting back to face-to-face classes? And why I ask that, we can put in place the community interventions which are crucial and necessary, and I support 125%, because before COVID, those were necessary. And I had relayed an experience to you based on my own experiences in business, that persons who, when we tested them, who graduated from high school, were testing at a grade 2 level. So I believe the remedial is important, pre-COVID, even post-COVID. But I want us to know, when we're getting back to face-to-face, why it's creating other psychosocial issues for families in communities. If you look at the abuse in homes, the children are suffering sometimes in silence. Physical abuse is up, based on what I'm seeing in the statistics. Sexual abuse is up in some areas. Parents, some mothers cannot go out to work because they now have to be home with the children sharing the device. And also, as we pointed out, many of them can't provide the support in terms of the academia. When the minister spoke 2 weeks ago, I believe it was, she said that of the 211,783 students enrolled in secondary schools, to date, 73,880 children between the ages of 12 to 18 years have had a COVID vaccine. I take it one COVID vaccine. So I have 3 questions coming out of that statement from the minister. 1, when or if will the ministry work with the Ministry of Health, whether to use some of your budget or other resources to source the second dose of the Pfizer vaccine, so that those 73,000 children can get their second doses? Why is it that we have not been told of the teacher population in the school system, how many of the teachers, principals, and admin staff of schools have been vaccinated, and within which regions have they been vaccinated? And the third question is, does the Ministry of Education have as yet a policy relating to whether or not mandatory vaccinations of children between the ages of 12 to 18 should be in place for us to resume school as well as for teachers? If that answer is no, and that you are not looking towards that, because other jurisdictions around the world, their school systems are opening, and you said, and I think Member Siblis was alluding to it, that we have to get to 65% of our schools' population in order to be open. What is the ministry's position on face-to-face classes resuming, on the specific and realistic methodology that the children and teachers need a certain percentage of vaccines? Because we can be doing all of these other things, but we're not getting to the most critical thing, which is our children need to go back to school.
Okay, so I have noted 4 questions, member. So, right. Okay, so the first question regarding collaboration with the Ministry of Health as it relates to sourcing Pfizer vaccine, I will reiterate, member, that we really do not get into the sourcing of vaccine, and based on the allocation that has been provided to us by the Ministry of Finance, we would not be in a position to actually indicate that we are providing support for the Ministry of Health in terms of the sourcing. I think FS is in a better place to indicate whether or not there is any issue as it relates to the sourcing.
So the answer is no. There's no urgency on the Ministry of Education's part.
No. There is urgency on the ministry's side as it relates to, as soon as the vaccines come, we are ready to go. We have a policy framework already developed and approved for the setting up of vaccination sites at our schools. We have host schools and feeder schools for vaccinations. We have trained our 201 school nurses. We have mobilized persons within the alumni for different schools who are doctors and supporters. And we have a full framework just ready to go with our principals once the vaccines become available.
For all of the school population, or even for those 78,000?
For those who are 12 and over, which the Pfizer
No, that's what I
vaccine-
mean, but the 78,000 students were the ones that I was asking urgency about.
Right, so...
Who got the first one?
So currently, the number is up to 83,000 being vaccinated, and of that number, 30,575 have already received their second dose. So we await the information regarding the additional to be vaccinated, and we are ready to go in that regard. As it relates to the teacher population vaccinated, this, I believe, is a policy directive question, Chairman, and so we would not be in a position to answer this.
That's not a policy directive question. That's a part of the school's population question.
Right.
If you are asking teachers to also go into communities and do a number of things, they form a part of the teaching cohort.
Right.
And so that if teachers are teaching students and students need to be vaccinated, there should be some reciprocity in terms of the policy. You can't have one without the other.
So as soon as we are so directed in terms of collecting this information and making decisions based on this information in terms of vaccination, member, then we will proceed accordingly.
So what you're saying to me, PS, is that we're having a system where the policy is to vaccinate the students, but we don't have a policy to vaccinate teachers.
So I would not say that, Chairman, because I believe there is a general vaccination policy that is being worked on that will guide the policy that the ministry will also put in place. So I would not be in a position to say that there is a policy as it relates to the teachers
but PS,
being
you're
vaccinated.
the PS.
What
Are you saying is that there's no policy yet from the government that directs you as to what it is that the teachers should be doing?
What I will say now, Chairman, is that we have discussed and have been directed to develop policy guidelines regarding just vaccination generally and their logistics, and really how the teachers and students are supported within the environment. That is being discussed at the e-COVID education task force that we currently have, and we expect those policy guidelines to be available within another 2 weeks or so.
So if this is not the policy yet, it means that my other question is almost redundant, because the answer that you're going to be giving me is according to whether or not the teachers are vaccinated to get to face-to-face. And if we don't have a policy there, then dog can and am with supper.
No, member. Your last question speaks to face-to-face resumption. We have been working with the Ministry of Health. We have done our risk ranking analysis in terms of the variables, especially for our students 12 and under. We have this information being reviewed now by our minister, and I am sure she will make a statement as soon as possible in terms of the actual resumption of face-to-face. So I leave that announcement for her to do, but Dr. Troop, myself, we have done the research, we have consulted with the Ministry of Health and Wellness, and we are encouraged by the fact that the positivity rate is going down, and we are just praying that it will continue. And I believe that our minister will do the rest in terms of updating the members when she gets to that stage.
Chair, can I just ask one follow-up question? I'm not sure if it was stated, but do you have the number of teachers that have been vaccinated to date within the system?
Yes, I have it.
Why did you get that answer? What I'm gathering from...
So I don't have the... Could I go ahead, Chairman? I don't have the number of teachers. What I have is the total number of persons within the education sphere, which is 31,967 vaccinated, and 13,300 are fully vaccinated. Right, so the approximate population is 45,000 for our public schools.
No, so the 31,000 are persons in the school space.
Yes, sir.
That include teachers and others.
Teachers, yes.
How many teachers do you have?
25,000 and
25,000. But you can't break it out
No, I don't have I think when the Ministry of Health started, this is a category that was placed for their database. What we have subsequently done. So going forward, we will be able to provide you with more specific information as we have done up the form that will be completed that will distinguish between a teacher, a janitor, a secretary, and so on.
When that will become available? Yeah.
That is what we currently have if and when we commence the process of our schools being vaccination sites.
Let's make it a little simple, PS. You're working on putting some data together that will say how many of your teachers,
right,
how much of your other groupings within the educational sphere have been.
Right. So we have asked.
My question is, when will that bit of information become available?
Well, we have just indicated, sir, that that information is necessary. We would have indicated to the Ministry of Health, and we have also the forms that will be completed that we have designed in collaboration with the Ministry of Health. Going forward, we'll have that information.
No, PS, I understand that. I also understand it's an ongoing exercise. So when you measure is where you are at some point in time.
Right.
So I am asking, and I believe the other members are interested, when can you provide the data up to a specified point in time? Say at the end of September or at the end of last week Friday, some date in October. Give some cutoff so that we all can have an appreciation how close we are to the goals that we want to reach. That's basically what I think members are interested in.
So, Chairman, I would prefer to do further consultation with the Ministry of Health to say when is that cutoff. They control the database itself. We get the information from the Ministry of Health and Wellness. So I would not want to give you a date that I am not able to commit to at this time, sir. But we can collaborate, and I will provide
let me ask you, in behalf of the other members, could you kindly seek from the Ministry of Health that information and advise Ms. Bailey, our secretary, what that information says? Because the truth of the matter, we are all at a loss as to how close or how far we are. So we can't really have an appreciation of the extent of the challenge. Yes, we hope that the virus will go away, but we have to deal with what we have. So if you could provide that, by tomorrow or so, later today, we'll appreciate that.
Just one final. P.S., you mentioned that in determining whether or not you go back to face-to-face, that you do a risk analysis. Right. Within that risk analysis, what are the factors that you take into consideration? Isn't vaccination one of those factors that would feature very highly in that analysis?
So the analysis that we have just completed, vaccination is not currently included. Again,
why wouldn't it be, PS?
Yes, because, I will say I am guided on this one, and so I would not want to commit for an area that I really have no expertise or directive in terms of vaccination.
Understood, PS. But so what are the factors that you take into consideration?
So I will indicate what those factors are. We look at the Ministry of Health provides the community data in terms of the spread of the COVID itself. So we are able to see where the clusters are, and we are able to see the positivity rate and numbers for each community. That is mapped on to the schools that we have to see where the high intense communities are and where there are communities without any COVID cases at all. So that's the main part of the data. We also look at the size of these schools and their ability to be able to accommodate X number of students with the protocols that are established by the Ministry of Health. We also look at the students who attend these schools, and we do a crude analysis of the transportation support for these students. It's a little easier at the primary level because most of the children in deep rural area, they walk to school. We look at the availability of running water, for example, so that if they have so that once they have their isolation booth and their facility in terms of course, wash stations and so on, that water, constant flow from NWC or from whether it is trucked water, so there are points that are apportioned to that as well. And I think there may be a set of other factors. So based on we also look at the enrollment of the school versus the capacity of the school. And so these are the factors that are analyzed. And of course, in analyzing these factors, we determine in terms of different categories of the high risk, medium risk, low risk. And then based on this, we make a recommendation to the Ministry of Health for consideration, and they guide us in terms of what else we should look for, or what they will advise against, or what they will support.
I have to give last short question, Member Siblings, and I have to cut it here now.
PS, Madam PS, I don't know if you can provide me with the answer based on your previous utterance to the other members, but I think what is missing, and you can probably provide it as well to the Secretary through the Chair, is what is the policy determinant to go back to face-to-face? What are the, I hear you say you're looking, there are various things that you're looking at and you're going to do the analysis, but what would be the trigger point, the policy trigger point that will say, we can have or we can recommend to Cabinet, through the Minister, to have face-to-face? What are those determinants? Because that probably would help other stakeholders to assist in realizing those determinants.
Okay, so the points that I indicated earlier, Member Siblings, to Member Hamilton, in terms of the risk ranking, would be the key points that are utilized. Once we have seen where a school is low risk, then the next important trigger is approval of their facility by the Ministry of Health and Wellness, the health inspectors certifying the school as satisfactory to commence face-to-face. So that is perhaps the most important trigger after we have done the risk ranking, and then the other would be consultation with parents for the readiness of students who would be able to access face-to-face.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. PS, thanks to you, Dr. Troop, and your colleagues for coming. I know we'll be meeting again, not in the distant future.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure. Members, we're just going to pause for a few minutes while the staff sanitize the room for the next ministry. So we'd have suspended for about 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Okay, members, could we resume now? And we are going to proceed with a time limitation, given that you all as members, especially member siblings, have consumed most of the time with Ministry of Education. Madam P.S. Martin, to you and your staff members and those from associated agencies that are present, welcome. As you will appreciate, we wanted to get an appreciation of the impact of the supplementary budget on your ministry, particularly because your ministry is one of those foremost in the dealing with the pandemic crisis that we face and the adjustments made. There are a couple of items that we highlighted that stood out in the supplementary. But as usual, I'm going to ask you to make a brief, concise overview of the budgetary shifts, because this is just a supplementary, not the central budget that we do at the beginning of the year. So you could do that, and then we'll invite any clarifications or any brief questions from members on your presentation on the budget itself. So, Madam P.S., could you please proceed?
Good morning, Chairman and members and colleagues from the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. Good morning, FS and DFS. Also,
when you look to the Ministry of Finance.
Also to my heads of agencies who are present with me this morning, and to my principal finance officer. So as you rightly said, Chairman, the ministry is very much involved in the COVID response, and represented this morning are the National Solid Waste Management Authority, the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, the Jamaica Fire Brigade, as well as the Social Development Commission, and the Board of Supervision, all entities that have a significant role in aspects of the COVID response. And so, sir, the overview in respect of the assignment, the significant shifts would be increases in respect of the responses as it pertains to response to the destitute and the indigent, as well as for support locally through the local authorities. And there is also a component in respect of community rehabilitation to address town centers as well as areas of historical significance and parks upgrade and so forth within the communities. And so for the Paint the City, there is 300 million, and for the destitute indigent, there is 160 million, and for under the Jamaica Survey in respect of e-learning devices, there is 140 million. There is also a component in respect of counselors' care packages of 70 million that is designed to also support what is happening locally through care packages. Overall, sir, those would be the main highlights in respect of the COVID response from the ministry.
Could you just say briefly how the 140 to purchase the devices for in-need students, how does that operate? How do you identify those in-need students to access the support?
Well, sir, this is the first we're having it. This is coming through the supplementary estimates. So we are now in dialogue with the Ministry of Education for the supporting information as it relates to the forms that will be utilized for the criteria and so on. But essentially, because it's through the local authorities, it's the counselors who, alongside with the community, the poor relief officers, who would identify those persons who are deemed to be in need.
So you have any data? I heard you about the forms and the process and so forth, but I would believe that it's the data from some assessment that will inform the number of, well, with a dollar amount and by extension the numbers. For example, you know, what information tells you that you have that need to be satisfied then, and what that number
This
is.
was an allocation, sir, if you recall, when the Minister of Finance spoke, he spoke to an amount to be made available to local government. So we'll now look at this and to define how it is that will be allocated across the parishes.
So you're going to use a lump sum and target, because of a set of criteria,
yes,
and target the funds towards those.
Correct, sir.
Okay. It would be useful when you have developed it, if we could get some update as to, you know, one, profile of the persons who are getting it and the quantum, and
right,
3, the distribution across the country. Just so we can have appreciation of what it's accomplishing or
yes,
would have accomplished.
Chair? Chair? Can I go ahead, Chair?
MP Hamilton.
Yes, Chair, that's a good designation.
And a factual designation.
P.S. Just to get an update, I see here where there are supplementary estimates for the end-of-life tires project. Could we get an update on that project and how is that going?
Okay, so this project, if the committee would recall, was initiated since this year. I believe the MOU would have been signed. It's last financial year, Mr. Gordon? Earlier this year, but it was still in the previous financial year, yes. And so with that, there was the allocation that was requested. And so the team, as we speak, is in dialogue with the company, the Jamaica Cement Company, and would have been working. But Mr. Gordon could speak to that more proficiently than me, because it is through the National Solid Waste Management Authority.
Okay, so morning all, and welcome. I welcome the opportunity to share with this committee the end-of-life tire project is one that is very important to us. The committee should know that we have, depending on the landfill, we have in Riverton, for example, well over 4 million tires, and there are some landfills across Jamaica with a huge amount of tires that, as we all know, is a time bomb and very dangerous. So this project is very helpful. The funding for the project is not settled in the sense that it is a 10-year project, and you know, with the movement of prices and as we go along, there will have to be adjustments made. So yes, it's going to be a work in progress. We have started removing tires now to the cement company, and we expect to continue as we have stated until the 10 years is completed, by which time we're hoping to have a significant reduction, because you know we get tires daily. So while we move tires, tires are coming in. But based on what we intend to move, we believe that over time we will see a significant reduction in the amount of tires that accumulate on the disposal site. We really want to get to a stage where tires are directed away from the disposal sites.
Let me declare, it's a subject that I have personal interest in, outside of, no, as a subject. But you said that the project is a 10-year project.
This current agreement, the MOU,
yes,
is a 10-year.
It's for 10 years, and the 10 years has started already.
We have started moving tires already, okay. Yes, sir.
For the 10 years, how much tires per year you contemplate moving?
All right, so the details, all those details I can make available to the committee with all the final details of the MOU, Chairman. It is widely circulated the MOU. I'm not so sure why you didn't get a copy, but I'll ensure that.
Can you make a copy available to the secretary?
That should be easy.
How soon can that be?
There is a copy here? Well, immediately, sir.
Okay. Then that will spare the detail,
Right.
Member Hamilton, here. Continue.
Just one other question, Chair. There is an allocation here for judgment debt payment of $12 million going to the SDC. I just wanted to get further information. Is this debt current? Is there any further information that can be given in relation to whatever court matter this is in relation to?
I'll ask Dr. Vernon to respond. It's in relation to the SDC.
Okay. All right. Good morning, all. With regard to the question, just to provide a little information, the debt is a case, or a claim was made against the SDC by Implementation Limited in 2002. Had to do with rental of our property. So the judgment was officially awarded in January 31, 2013 to Implementation Limited, of course, against the SDC. We appealed in 2013. Hearing took place in 2016, but the judgment was reserved, of course, until 2016, and the Court of Appeal decision was December 2019. So the final amount here, overall, settled with amortized to be around 59 million. So we have, so we're going to be paying it over an 8-year period. So that's where we are now. So we are current with the repayment, and it's something that we're addressing. So we don't have any further issue.
No, you said that the judgment was given, right? You said
Yes.
2019?
In 2019, yes.
In the total of?
Overall, the amortized, based on the agreement, the amortized amount now, everything I know is 59 million.
59 million.
59.7 million. So we have a payment schedule. So the 12 million here is to facilitate the first year's payment.
And that payment period is 8 years?
Over 8 years. Well, 6 to 8 years, I can confirm. I will confirm.
What was the nature of the claim? What was the nature of the claim?
The nature of the...
What was the issue that was brought before the court?
issue. No, it had to, that's it was a rental of, I think it was Jamaica property.
Pardon me, a rental?
A rental. It was a rental of a property. So they had some issues regarding that property, the rental of the property.
Mr. Salmon, that's kind of vague. I hear the answer, but I can't make anything out of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Non-payment of rental for a period. Thank you. Yes.
Oh.
So the rental that was owing or claimed to have been owing was disputed by the SDC?
We did. That's why it went to court, and of course why we appealed. But again, it was upheld.
No. I mean, before it went to court, before the matter was brought before the court, the amount that was owing was disputed by the SDC. Are you saying that you did not owe that money?
Well, I said it's something we inherited. So I'm really going from content analysis, but in the information, I don't see where they had made an initial claim that we disputed. So it's a matter of rent not going for a period. So I can research some more to find out exactly what the first amount was. Why
I'm asking the question is because generally, in a rental arrangement like that, you would have been given some kind of notice to say, this amount is owing, are you willing to pay? And given some time within which to pay, so that the matter would not have been brought before the court for you to have a $59.7 million judgment. I just want to understand the reasoning why it wasn't settled outside of the court space.
Yes, as I said, the claim was made in 2002, so there's a lot of years that would have elapsed
Understand, but you must
Yes.
have that information internally.
Sure, I will research that
Okay.
and provide that to the House.
It was very vague to me too. All right, members. Just one last question, Mr. Gordon. Garbage collection. Mr. Gordon, my direction. Garbage collection. Much complain about the garbage collection across many parishes are way below what they normally were.
Chair, I really welcome again the opportunity to speak specifically to garbage collection, where we are now and where we could have been. Chair, I will preface my response to you with these comments. We have never, as a society, adequately fund solid waste management in this country. The records are clear. You will get a few trucks here, a few trucks there. You submit budgets annually, as we do. We carefully craft a budget. For example, the last budget exercise, we craft a budget for $10.1 billion, and we had to survive on $5.3 billion because there is a ceiling that is set elsewhere, and it doesn't matter what you craft up at the agency, you have to fit within that ceiling. I am not quarreling, I'm just stating a fact that we have not adequately or credibly funded solid waste management in this country. That said, Chair, we are in a very bad state in most areas now. We are running backlogs. Because 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we saw a gap, a widening gap in the operational capacity as it relates to truck. Through detailed analysis, letters were written, meetings were held, and we achieved a consensus with government that we need 100 new garbage trucks. We were among the most elated, happiest people in the world 2 years ago when the Minister of Finance in this Honorable House spoke to the approval of 100 garbage trucks for the National Solid Waste Management Authority. We must have been the hardest hit by COVID because the moment COVID hit Jamaica, that was the first thing that was deferred. What was not deferred was the need. The need still remains with us today and is even more pronounced now than it was 2 years ago. So currently we do have 100 and odd trucks, probably 110 trucks, of which 40% is inoperable. They're not, if a matter of fact, they should be border surveyed. So we are operating with about 60 government-owned trucks, 65 maybe, depending on the days. You might be able to band-aid up and patch up extra 5. In an atmosphere where we actually need 150 to 200 trucks to operate properly. So we have to rely heavily on supplementary fleet, and I want to use the opportunity to acknowledge those supplementary contractors and to thank them for, coming, albeit at a commercial interest, to help us at the agency, because without them we'd have grown to a halt long ago. We have to rely heavily on supplementary fleet. I say this respectfully, Chair, that most of the fleet that comes through the supplementary source are aged fleets. They're aged, they're not new trucks. And so what we have is a very inefficient operation going, where outside of the 60 trucks that we got between 2016 and now, we really don't have anything else to rely on in terms of reliable units. And so we need, and if I could be forgiven for the overemphasizing, we need the 100 new garbage trucks to come into the system. And we need them fast because, Chair, every day that we delay, the problem gets worse. Recall now that trucks are not shelf items. They are not stuck on a shelf somewhere. So even if the money was to be found today, by the time you get through the procurement, 2-3 months to procure and to select a contractor or a supplier, that person will then have to order the trucks, which would take 90 to 120 days to manufacture. And then you throw in a 1 month for shipping time. So if we get the money today, we probably couldn't put a truck on Jamaican soil until next May.
Mr. Gordon, we have a little time constraint. Yeah. You indicated that you have 110 trucks, and about 60% of them are operational.
Yes, sir.
And you were answering the question of where you are with the garbage collection. In short, you are severely short of trucks which you need.
Yes.
On a scale of 1 to 10, within the last year or so, or whatever period, with the deterioration in the available trucks and that shortage, what percentage of service are you now providing?
Well, okay,
and
so...
just before you answer to it, I just wanted to clarify, if the 65 trucks that you mentioned about, is it your own trucks or it include those that are contracted also?
No, the 65 is government-owned trucks.
Okay, on how many is contracted?
So we actually have on our books over 100 government-owned trucks.
Yes.
But we need 150 trucks to do a proper job, minimum. So we rely on supplementary truck now to work with our 60, 50.
Right. How many are you contracting now to supplement the 65?
Yeah, we are contracting now somewhere in the region of 100 trucks. But not all, and I clarify that not all the 100 trucks are available on a day. But that's what we have.
Overall, yes. Okay.
But on a daily now, we're probably getting about 60 to 70 of those.
60 to 70 plus the 65 that you have. Okay.
And again, Chairman, because I see where you're going, I want you to remember that those are old trucks. You see them on the road.
Yes.
And they're very old trucks. Hence, the efficiency that we need. We just
and reliability is poor.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. I think that is at the core where I want to get at, to have an assessment of where we are now, where we should be, because we have heard the complaint about the reduced levels of service being provided. And you gave us the numbers as it relates to your capacity. Right. Members, okay.
So, Chairman, while the members put the questions together.
No, they don't have any more.
They don't have any more?
No.
Oh, because I want to answer, for example, Portmore, for example.
Yeah.
Portmore needs 15 trucks per day. On the best day, Chairman, I can find 10 trucks at Portmore on the best day, sometimes down to all 6. Which means when I go in with 10 on Monday, I'm leaving Monday garbage to catch Tuesday garbage. And that's what we have as a reality.
I'm aware that was quite frankly part of my motive for asking the question.
Same thing with Senton, Chair.
How much truck Senton need before I get to my question? Since you're just so...
No, Senton, overall, we need to have at least 8 trucks in Senton to do a good job each day. Of course, most of those would have been in the heavily populated areas. But I have the figures, so I don't mind.
If you can just provide those for the benefit of...
And Chair, I just want to say, I know you're rushing, that solid waste management is not hard, it's not rocket science. But we have some cultural defects that this Honourable House have to help us with. Our people don't containerize their garbage properly in the main. A lot of them just don't properly containerize their garbage. We also have wanton littering. people just see an empty spot or have a mattress to discard, they just throw it there. A lot of illegal dump.
That has been a long-standing
popping up all over the place.
issue, and how you structure the thing to deal with those. We won't detain the committee with those discussions for today. Member Hannah and Member Hamilton, short, brief, please.
Yeah. The 160 million. Oh, good morning, everybody. My manners. The 160 million for poor relief. I know since the start of COVID, our infirmaries have been not accepting new clients, I'll put it that way. And certainly because of COVID, the numbers of persons who need assistance through the poor relief of the municipal corporations has increased immensely. Can you just tell me what is the policy of the infirmaries? Is it that they will not be accepting persons who actually need to be there? And how will the poor relief departments of the municipal corporations lessen the burden on persons, communities, and families who have persons who need to be sent to an infirmary? I have at least 3 experiences in my jurisdiction of Southeast St. Anne where the people have no family, the community have to be helping. So how will this 160 million assist, and what is the policy now for the infirmaries working through the poor relief departments? Is there something ramped up? What will happen? P.S.
Okay, thank you, Member. In respect of the policy, the GOJ's policy at this time is that there will be no new acceptance of new residents to the infirmaries at this time. But I do believe that that is consistently and continually under review, and at the appointed time, the relevant changes will be made. In respect of the 160 million that has been allocated, I will ask the Secretary for the Board of Supervision to give you some details.
Good morning, afternoon, everyone. In regards to the 160 million, a portion of it has been allocated to the infirmaries to improve our infection control procedures.
Can you just tell me how much infections we've had within the infirmaries and maybe how many deaths as well, as you give that information?
To date, we have 254 persons who are infected and 17 deaths so far. We do not have any active cases right now, right? So as well as we have a new screening procedure before you enter, and that's for the staff and service providers. So a portion of the money goes to that aspect of the program, as well as our homeless feeding program. You asked about the increases to the outdoor, well, to clients who may need assistance to go to the infirmary but are not able to. The poor relief departments have been asked to increase their home care assistance that they offer, where they can link persons in the community for a stipend to assist persons who may be in need. And poor relief officers have also increased their case management and are doing more visits to the clients who would be in need of institutional care. However, because of the policy now, we are not accepting anyone.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. P.S., we're going to say thanks at this point for coming. I know Mr. Gordon would want more time in here in the presence of the Ministry of Finance in particular, but I will suggest that you be so engaged after you depart here. Thanks much.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members.
And remember, really, the matter of the end of use as MOU with the Secretary. Okay.
All right.
Let me welcome the Ministry of Labour and Social Security. Could we realize Madam Risden is not with us today, who will be leading from the ministry?
Morning, Chairman. I'm Dion Jennings, Acting Permanent Secretary.
Say that again, please.
Dion Jennings.
Dennis.
Yes, Jennings.
Jennings.
Yes, Acting Permanent Secretary.
Is that you, well?
Yes, it
you
is. PS Risen is on leave,
okay.
And with me this morning are team members, Mr. Jason Anderson to my right, the Principal Finance Officer, Mrs. Audrey Deere-Williams to the far right, CTD for Social Security,
sure.
Mrs. Elsa Marks-Willis, Project Director for PATH, directly behind me, and to my far right behind is Mr. Owen Whiteley, Director of Administration.
Oh. Welcome, Mrs. Jennings.
Thank you, sir.
We are quite familiar with you from elsewhere. I couldn't recognize you under the mask this morning. Well, as you know, your ministry is one of those central to the dealing with some of the increased challenges with the pandemic, and by extension, the supplementary budget would focus on making allocations to your ministry to deal with these additional demands for the rest of the financial year. So I'm going to ask you if you just give us a brief overview of the budgetary impact on your ministry going forward in this fiscal year, and then we'll take brief questions from members of the committee.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. The Ministry of Labour and Social Security continues to provide service and treat with matters relating to individuals across the life cycle. And so we have been providing service to not just workers, employees, and participants in the labour force, but our pensioners, persons with disabilities, senior citizens, beneficiaries of the Public Assistance Program, mainly through PATH, Program for Advancement Through Health and Education. And all of this is being done in the midst of a pandemic. We have noted, though, that we have been able to have 40,000 persons added since last year, March 2020, on the PATH program, and 5,696 new beneficiaries since the start of this financial year. So COVID experience has brought into sharp focus some of the critical social protection and labor challenges that are evident in our operations. And so we have been trying to ensure that we support persons to ensure that their income streams are almost stable. We provide a safety net to those persons who are vulnerable. And of course, the ministry is significantly placed under pressure, given our financial and human resources, but we are up to the task in delivering the social protection services to our clients. As it relates to the supplementary estimates, our original tabled recurrent budget for the financial year 2021-2022 currently stands at 13.652 billion, while the capital budget for the financial year stands at 81.09 million. The proposed supplementary recurrent budget is 14.785 billion, and of course this is through the Finance Committee amendment, where we have seen an increase of 1.133 billion, or 8.3%, over the original tabled budget. The proposed supplementary capital budget is 169.9 million, an increase of 109%, or 88.8 million. Since April 2021, the ministry has expended a sum of 7.6 billion, out of which 6.7 was under the social welfare services. Majority of that has been seen in our expenditure for the rehabilitation support program since April 21, where we have spent 178 million, and that also includes our commitments. On the path, we have expended 4.9 billion for grants, or 63% of the budget, since April. In the supplementary budget, Chairman and members, we have support to persons with disabilities. That's $40 million under the Jamaica Serve program. That's Social and Economic Recovery and Vaccine program. And this will assist persons with disabilities, one of the vulnerable groups that we have to deal with. The other matter under the supplementary estimates we have is for grants and contributions from the World Food Program, where we are accounting for donations that have been provided under this program to non-PATH beneficiaries. There is an additional of 1.13 million for the distribution to vulnerable families. And this will be for direct transfers to these persons, and there's an amount of 40,000 US for administrative support. The other area that we have under this supplementary estimates is the additional requirement, which represents transfer from head 4100, and this is for nutrition grants payments to parents for nutritional support for PATH students, both at the early childhood, primary, and secondary levels. And this is on behalf of the Ministry of Education that the PATH program is facilitating these cash grants to these families of these parents, considering that school is out. And finally, under the integrated support to Jamaica's social protection strategy, a project in collaboration with the IDB, we have been granted some fiscal space to ensure that we can make some payments for some activities under the program. And that, in summary, Chairman and members, is my brief opening remarks.
Okay. On that integrated program, the last one you just mentioned you said you would be engaged in some activities. Could you just say what's the nature of those activities that you are now able to fund?
Okay. There will be some payments made for activities, for example, tracer study of PATH beneficiaries.
What study? I didn't get the first.
A tracer study of PATH beneficiaries, the amount of 1 million. Improvements to the labor market information system website, 5.2. We will also introducing the voice communication over internet network protocol, the VoIP technology, in the Ministry of Labour and Social Security and the parish offices. We have 32.9 million. And public education campaign, that's still under the Economic Labour Exchange, and other small payments. The customer service upgrade of the Hero Circle office in the amount of 27. And we have furniture and furnishings for that customer service department in the amount of 6.2 million.
P.S., could you mention about the non-part support program that you have?
Okay, so is it in particular to the World Food Program?
Well, generally that, and
generally.
Other, because in light of the whole pandemic, you would have to expand to accommodate persons who are in need, who are not on path. Okay. What we sometimes refer to as the near path.
Right.
Groupings of persons.
Okay, so I did mention the rehabilitation support earlier, and that includes support for emergency relief. And so in times of disasters, for example, persons would have experienced fires and that sort of thing. And we provide support to those persons. We also have the Compassionate Grant that assists persons who are in need and who have submitted their requests through our social workers. We also have support for educational support and emergency grants.
Members?
Just for clarification, Chair. P.S., the 1.13 million for distribution and the 40,000 US, is that included in the donations you were given, or this is your cost? Is this the ministry's cost?
This is donations from the World
Is it included
Food
in the
Program.
donations?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, ma'am.
No other question? I know many members work closely with your ministry for various support. I've been one of them too. So no doubt we'll be in touch with you.
Yes, sir. And of course, the short-term grants to members of parliament, I'm sure they're familiar with that, and that's also non-part support that persons in the island can benefit from.
That's why I was particularly questioning about the non-part support.
Okay,
yes.
sir.
Because the truth is that there are a number, while there is a prescribed set of parameters for being on path, there are many persons who don't meet those criteria, who need support. And that is where the non-part support allocation can help to fill a gap.
Chair, is it possible for us to get those parameters that you referred to in relation to who can go on part?
Yeah, the parameter I referred to is the criteria that they use in part to determine whether or not you're qualified to come on. And it has been a long-standing debate about some of them, such as the flush toilet.
I've been trying to get those parameters, Chair, because it's been a concern. There are a number of persons who I would observe, and I would be of the belief that they should be on path, but for whatever reason, they're told that they don't qualify.
Yes.
Is that information, could I get a copy of the criteria?
Certainly, and I think earlier in the year, following another committee meeting, I think it was a PAC, the ministry engaged all parliamentarians in a sensitization session on all the programs within the ministry, and PATH was one of them. But just to note, though, that if persons did not get on PATH, they have the opportunity to appeal, and so that they should be aware of, and they can go through that appeals process, so that can be taken care of.
Pierce, on your team, you don't have a long stay with us today. But
I think
we'll
it's
make
very
up for it.
straightforward, Chairman and members.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having us.
The deliberations are limited today
Okay.
for just a supplementary.
Thank
Members, thank you much. We will really move to adjournment now to give time for the report to be completed and be tabled later on this afternoon. Seconded? Member Hamilton. Okay. Meeting stand adjourned.
The following is brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
I'm saying to every single Jamaican, you will decide how this pandemic ends. If you wear your mask, if you maintain the physical distance, and if you decide to take the vaccines when it is your time, the pandemic will end. But if in frustration or just ignorance, we do not take responsibility, then the pandemic could end badly, including the loss of more lives.
The proceeding was brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.